everyone. Thanks for joining in today. We have with us Anthony Pierri. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Anthony, who is a partner at Fletch PMM. Fletch PMM is a product marketing consulting company for early stage startups. Anthony has a prolific following on LinkedIn and shares a lot of useful frameworks and opinion pieces on there. I actually discovered him on LinkedIn, reached out to connect, and here we are today talking about early stage marketing, specifically product marketing at early stage companies. Welcome, Anthony, to S11s, and thank you for taking the time to speak with our audience here.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So let's start with, as I said, right? We would keep we talk about product marketing in general, and then we'll get into the specifics of product marketing at early stage startups, and then probably get, if time permit, we'll talk about your journey, how it has been before Fletch PMM as well as at Fletch PMM, right? So wanted to first knock off this with a general question around product marketing. So people of so things like, okay, people often confuse between positioning, messaging, and value prop, right? So how would you define positioning, messaging, and value proposition, and what are the differences between the three?
Yeah, great question. So, positioning in general is where do you fit in the overall market landscape and in the minds of your customers. So,
Mm-hmm.
broadly, are you in one product category or another? Are you the cheap version of expensive product? Are you the
Mm-hmm.
luxury version of a cheap product? Um, are you like a big product competitor, but you're actually for a smaller group of people who maybe not served by the main group of customers of a larger company? So positioning in general is like where do you fit in the overall landscape? But then also, how do customers actually think about you? What do they think about when they see your product? What bucket do they put you in?
Mm-hmm.
In the States, we have grocery stores with a whole shelf dedicated just to mustard. So if you are like a regular old mustard or you're a spicy mustard, right, and you stand out to everyone when they walk by, that's your positioning. Messaging is essentially, all right, well, if that's where we want to be characterized in the minds of customers and in the market, how do we actually explain that to them? How do we put that in words that they'll understand, that will resonate, that will actually get across? So when you think about a product market fit, like you have a product in the market, the messaging is essentially what carries across your distribution channels, what carries that positioning to the end users or the people you're trying to reach. So it's like the packaging almost of how you explain this product to each of your different customer segments. And the value proposition is essentially what unlock am I going to drive in your life and why would that matter to you? And so when you think about these, we break it down into a couple different groups. You have features of your product, which enable what we would call a capability, which is like you can now do something with that feature that you couldn't do before. And then it drives a benefit, which is really an outcome. So maybe the outcome might be we save you 5 hours a week. And then the value of that is different depending on who you're going after. Saving 5 hours a week might not be that important for some roles, where in other roles it might be crucial. And if you could get back 5 hours, the value would be so much higher. So essentially, if you think about it broadly, you have the broadest thing is your positioning of like where do you actually fit, and then the messaging is what carries that positioning to the end users. And then the value proposition is like once you get it in front of them, what actually are you promising to do? You're now going to be able to do this, which is going to drive this outcome, and that hopefully will matter to you enough that you'll pay us either in your time or your money or whatever it might be.
Got it. Glad that you actually touched upon features and benefits. And I remember your recent controversial take on LinkedIn that talked about why should brand essentially talk about features and not benefits, because benefits essentially make you sound like a lot like your competitors, and it's hard to differentiate when you are just talking about benefits. And typically in a product that is PLG focused, or product that is used by the buyer and the user are essentially the same, uh, a self-serve SaaS type, right? In those kind of products, it often becomes like a uh, tale of how many features and what features and capabilities that the product has, and not really about benefits, right? Um, so yeah, Rohit. 1000 martech products and benefits of each of them. Follow-up question on this, building on what you just said, right? When and why should messaging highlight features instead of benefits?
Yeah, great question. So my partner and I, Robert, we have a lot of big opinions on this. And what we've seen is in the macroeconomic climate right now, where there's a lot of belt tightening, people aren't really spending as much money on software platforms. What's happening is that a lot of software deals are getting killed in the final stages by like the chief financial officer coming in and saying, "What are we buying? Oh, we're going to And so what happens is people will ask, "Well, what's the return on investment on this product?" And they'll push for this question a lot. And so in response, all these startups and SaaS companies are like, we need to put ROI and benefit messaging front and center on our website. And so if you even look at like there's that thing called the Wayback Machine where you can look at what did a website look like 6 months ago versus what does it look like today. If you go back 6 months ago, everyone's websites looked very different, maybe even like a year. And now everyone's website pages are basically saying, boost your revenue. We're gonna 10x your whatever, and it's all these benefit statements. And effectively what it does is it makes every website look relatively the same, saying the same thing, and actually removes all the differentiating pieces of each of these products. And while that might work if you have the brand awareness and recognition of someone like Nike or McDonald's, so no matter, everyone knows what you are, but a lot of these software companies, they've maybe reached, I don't know, 10, 15% of their total addressable market. And there's probably 85% of people who still don't quite know what they are. They might have heard the name. They loosely know what area of the market they live in. But the actual distinctive things of like, okay, well, what problem do they solve? How do they solve it? When would I need them? What would they replace? All those questions are still kind of up in the air. So when they visit the websites of these companies and they just see boost your revenue and then pages and pages of just benefit language, right? They have no idea what the product is. They see it and they're like, I don't get it. I don't know if I would need this. And I'm not shopping for a revenue boost. What happens is that like there's a misunderstanding of how people shop for products. Usually people think, well, they're really trying to solve revenue. They need to 2x their revenue over the next quarter. But the thing is that what people do is they go like this in a board meeting or high up, they say we need a 2x our revenue. And then the internal leaders have some hypotheses about which tools or approaches would lead to that outcome. And then they come to this conclusion, we need a better sales enablement platform. That's what we need to shop for. So then when they start looking at sales enablement platforms and they see on the page 5x your revenue, what they actually want to see is, why would I choose this sales enablement platform over that one? And when they all just say boost your revenue, it's like there's a mismatch of where they're talking. On the website, they're talking to a problem that was already figured out a couple steps earlier in like the customer funnel, right? They already decided way up there they needed to boost their revenue, and then they picked a product category, and then they land it on your page. So by the time they get to your page, they want to know, well, how does this work? And like, how would I actually use it? What would my team do? And they use that to gauge whether they actually believe that you can deliver the benefits you say you can deliver. And so if you do a very poor job of explaining what is it, how does it work, they won't care at all that you've put all these nice benefits, because they're just, by that point in the journey, they just want to understand which solution they should go with of the relative solutions in the category. So we've seen this whole push to put ROI on the center of your websites and your messaging as a mistake. We think it's actually moved everyone in the wrong direction. And what really they should be doing is back solving higher up the funnel to prove that you actually need our product, that it actually is going to solve a big problem. And that happens way, way higher up the funnel, way less close to the acquisition messaging that might be on a specific website.
Got it. On a related note, wanted to get a sense of, like, if you could just talk about this in detail and give like an example with respect to, I don't know if any of your client or just not taking their name here.
Yeah, I can. I'll share one. So I'm not going to say the name of the company, but if you go on the page, it says I'm not going to say the product category either, but it says the blank platform is used by forward-thinking teams to increase conversions. So there's our first big benefit statement: increase conversions. Okay, well,
Uh-huh.
how do they do that? Then it says, use your greatest asset, your product, to unlock a new growth engine. Unlock a new growth engine. That's another benefit. Still, we don't know what the product is. Keep going down. Empower your go-to-market team. Enable your entire team with a growth lever that doesn't require any engineering work. We still benefit, benefit, benefit. I don't know what the product is. I don't know how it works. Keep going on. Improve your website conversion and user acquisition rates. Benefit. Increase the quality of your leads and speed up time to demo. Benefit. Give prospects a customer better first product impression. Benefit. Still don't know what it is, right? I'm 3 sections down on the page. It integrates into your existing tech stack. Great. I don't know what it is. And then it says explore use cases. And now there's 3 blocks with use cases. Optimize your funnel. Benefit. Close leads more efficiently. Benefit. Activate customers and prospects. Benefit. So, and then we get to the CTA. Get a demo. I never heard. What is it? How does it work? How would I use it? What am I even looking at on the screen? So this type of stuff is so funny. People harp on stop sharing features, talk about the benefits. Everyone says that, but if you actually look at websites, everyone only talks about benefits, and they've completely forgotten that people are buying a product. You don't shop for optimizing of a funnel. I need to actually have a product that I log into and use.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. uh, and coming from my own experience, like, right, when I talk to founders and the company that I have worked previously, right, uh, founders have these expectations, like if they're not able to fit their product in a category that is already defined, they are, in love with this idea of creating a new category for the product that they built. Because they are the ones who have built the product and the product is their baby and they love the product. They're like, okay, we should be building a new category for this, and we should not be fighting on a canvas that has already been defined by our competitors who have existed for a while, and we are different on so and so on, so parameters, right? And then I quote the blog post written by Cancel of Drift, wherein he had said that category creation is a endeavor which is like, it takes a lot of money, time, and resources, and a lot of companies should stay away from doing it, and especially startups. So, question to you here: have you faced such instances wherein any founder that you have typically worked with at Fletch PMM, right, have asked you such questions around creating category, and what has your guidance to them been like, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, so totally agree with that post. Um, really, category creation, it's a long-term game, and it requires, like you said, a ton of money, time, resources, and it fails all the time. That people try and they never get the
Sure.
category off the ground. Because to get the category off the ground means that not only other competitors need to enter the space and use the same category as you, but also that you need to have trade shows that
Hmm.
launch around the product category. You need to have people who are creating YouTube videos about the product category. You need publications writing about the product category. You need to have like external software partners and agencies servicing around it. You need people teaching it. There should be books about it. So like that's when a category really matures. So like I'm watching one right now. Product led sales is this new category, and it's basically this idea that you can use your product to find signals of people who are ready for upsell. So it's like you can, instead of just calling all of your customers, do you want to buy more of our software? You actually look at how you're using the product. So product led sales has been growing over the years, but some of the biggest players in it, because of the thing I was talking about earlier, the CFOs wanting to prove out revenue, a lot of the big
Hmm.
players have abandoned product led sales as the name. And now they call it like revenue platform, like some sort of revenue related word. I can't even remember it. So
Revenue
even with all
acceleration.
this time and yeah, something like that. Even with all this time and energy, it's like some of the people are bailing because they're like, it's not working anymore. So when people are thinking about creating a category, what they really should be thinking about doing is creating a subcategory. So like, let's take Fletch. Me and my partner, we
Hmm.
don't really fit in a category easily. We're kind of like consultants in a sense that we come in and we help you figure out what you need to do. But we're also kind of like an agency because we actually deliver an end, like a usable piece of like an asset. where we actually help you figure out your positioning and your messaging, but then we actually create you a web page wireframe with words on it and copy and structure and all that stuff. So we don't quite fit in either of those categories because a lot of agencies just come in and will do the thing for you, and they're long custom projects that last multiple months. And consultants don't always do the work. They actually, a lot of times they could just give you advice. And then there's also like the advisor thing. So even with us, we could say, well, let's create a new category. We're a brand new blank. And that's not that smart. So like we even say we're kind of like consultants, but we actually help you do the work. So it's like a subcategory of a big thing that, and ideally you pick a category where you have strengths over the competitors. So you pick something where you say we're like that category, but we're way better. So we see this a lot with founders, but like we look at, like, for the example, Airtable, complex product to explain. In the early days, when they talked to prosumers, they said we're like a super advanced spreadsheet. And prosumers understood that. They knew what Excel and Google Sheets looked like. And so when they got into Airtable, it gave them a frame of reference. And then they saw all the stuff that Airtable could do. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is so much better. When they talked to database people, like engineers, they said we're like a really lightweight SQL database. And then the engineers were like, oh, this is great. I can pop in and relationally connect these things together without having to actually, type in SQL and all that stuff. So for us, we say choose subcategories, and that doesn't necessarily need one. It's really a subcategory for each of the different segments you might be going after. So rather than saying we're going to try to create one category for everyone that everyone needs to understand and adopt, we would say actually choose multiple different subcategories for each of your segments. Because if you're going after different segments, it's okay if you call yourself different things, whatever's going to make sense to the group you're trying to reach.
Got it. No, makes a lot of sense. Rohit and Siddharth, if you want to chip in here with anything that you want to ask as follow-ups. I know I've been asking my questions.
Okay, I think Rohit's off camera.
Mm-hmm.
I know he's back on. Cool. My question was very simple, Anthony. Like, it's very easy to get confused between positioning and messaging, right? Because people do a positioning workshop, they basically come up with, like, the end goal is typically one tagline that will describe the company, right? Like,
Yeah, go ahead.
okay. I thought you were saying something. Okay, cool. So when you got to pitch it to your senior executives, right, as a marketer, right, at a SaaS startup, how do you do it as a marketer, saying that, okay, hey, listen, we are got to invest in positioning, but this will not give you a tagline. This will give you a category, right? Your category. And then we have to invest in messaging as well, right? Because messaging will derive from the positioning, right? So how do you pitch it to your CEOs? How do you pitch it to your senior executives and basically say, okay, hey, listen, this is what we've got to do, right? And this is, and the output is not one tagline.
Yeah. No, that's really good. So we say, wait to care about taglines until you're, at least $1 billion company. Then you can start thinking about taglines because maybe people know about you enough by then. But before that, everyone else, don't worry about taglines. They're not going to help you. They're actually going to confuse your audience. Nobody cares. So what we say to do, and what often happens is we'll get reached out to by a head of marketing, VP of marketing at maybe a Series A, Series B, sometimes Series C startup. And they say, I've been following your stuff or whatever it is, and we want to work with you to help figure out our positioning. And then a lot of times there's tension between them and the founder. And the founder is like this: I don't want to choose a positioning that's too narrow because I don't want to rule out a bunch of segments that I might go after. And so what they end up doing is like not actually positioning themselves at all. They say, and actually I'll come back to Airtable. Airtable recently fixed this and made it better. But for a while, the H1 and H2, the headline and the subheadline on their website was connect everything, achieve anything. And then it was following after that, each sentence was like unlimited use cases, like solve all your dreams. Like it was essentially just a page of like phrases that didn't tell you anything. And it was because they were like this: we have such a flexible product, it can be used by anyone to do anything. So if we try to give examples, we're going to make people think this is not for us and they're going to go away. So usually those are the two competing voices. You have a founder who's like, I want to reach my $1 billion market. I told investors I was going to reach this market, and I can't go more narrow on any one segment because then I'm going to not reach my investor expectations. And then you have the marketer and the sales team who says, okay, well, if I go out and I start cold emailing people saying, connect everything, achieve anything, do you know how many people are going to respond? Nobody. If I run ads saying, connect everything, achieve anything, nobody's going to click them because the marketers and salespeople are living in reality, not in VC investor world. They're actually looking day to day. How are we going to get more customers today, tomorrow, 6 months from now? And they know that type of messaging doesn't work. And so what we usually help startups do, especially if they're earlier stage, is we say, okay, we understand the tension. We understand the tension that you don't want to lop off huge sections by being too narrow. But we know in the back of our mind that's actually probably how they're going to reach their $1 billion market is if they start narrow and then gradually broaden as they take over more segments. But so we say, okay, so what you need to kind of do is what we would call like partial positioning. And so we have this system where we have these 6 different, we call them positioning anchors. You can anchor your positioning on a group of people. You can anchor it on a product category. You can anchor it on a problem that you solve. You can anchor it on a big benefit that you promise, or you can anchor it on like a feature that nobody else has. So usually we say, okay, let's pick maybe 1 or 2 of these positioning anchors, and we're going to kind of leave the other ones ambiguous for now, but we'll get at least 1 or 2 so that you have something you can position on. If you have none of those anchors, if you stay, connect everything, achieve anything, you will not position at all, and products that aren't positioned can't be marketed. So what we say is let's pick 1 or 2. And so sometimes it comes to like a product category for a specific person. So let's take the example of Brave, the browser. It's basically the web browser for people who value privacy. So lots of different people value privacy for different reasons. Security people, maybe engineers, drug dealers, I'm just kidding. But basically, right, people don't want to get tracked for all sorts of reasons. But that's enough of a positioning so that people could say, well, what's Brave? Oh, well, they're the web browser, but they don't track you. They don't steal your data. So that's one of the pairings we often use. Another one is we anchor on a very specific context and the problem that leads to. So, for example, if we can't necessarily say who, sometimes you could talk about a really specific context and the problems that leads to. So, like, for example, there's a company that we have worked with that is basically trying to solve when you have a bunch of software subscriptions for a big team. It can be kind of hard to manage all of them. You end up paying for seats that no longer exist. Like people aren't even using it, but you're still paying for it. So the context for them is like, you're the person managing all these software subscriptions. That's not a specific person in the sense of like it's a role or a title. It's just like a context. It's like we're managing subscriptions. And then the problem with that is what I just said, right? Like that you're going to overpay and stuff like that. So for them, the positioning is like, we're going to end your overpayment for the people who are managing all these software subscriptions. So between this context and this problem, now anyone who fits in that context will see themselves in it and they'll recognize the problem immediately. And you're basically promised that you're going to end the problem for them. So that becomes the positioning. Another one is like, if you think of the Calendly, right? Calendly is a booking software. People use it for all different reasons, but they can anchor on the ability we would call the capability. That was the 6th one. I think I listed only 5. The 6th one is you anchor on a product capability, a new unlock that you couldn't do before. So Calendly was anchored on this capability of like, let other people book time directly on your calendar without this back and forth. So that's like enough of a positioning that anyone who's trying to book time will be interested and say, okay, I want to try that product. So we always say like the best positioning is more specific. The more anchors you can have, the better you're going to resonate. But obviously when you start adding more of the anchors, sometimes the market segment gets smaller. But we always would say like, if you fully 100% dominate a smaller market segment, it's better than like barely penetrating a giant one. So yeah, long rambling answer, but hopefully that's helpful.
No, it is. I have a follow on. You talked about how you have it for a specific use case or a specific segment and you anchor based on those, right? Typically, a startup journey goes via different routes, right? Sometimes you might expand to a different user segment, and you might be serving 2-3 user segments at once, right? You might not be serving only one person for a particular use case. Either you might be serving one audience with multiple use cases, or you might be serving multiple audiences for say multiple use cases. It can differ. Now, when you have chosen on a particular positioning, right, and you know that positioning is not going to work for the next set of users as you expand your ICP and you basically, double down on your GTM, how do you basically tackle that problem? How have you seen people tackle that problem? How have brands tackled that problem, saying that, okay, hey, my positioning was okay, I was X for Y, now I am A for B, right? Now how do I say X and A on the same, how do I position myself, how do I let people know that I'm valid for both the audiences and I solve both the use cases?
Yeah. So it becomes a like an information hierarchy question. So if you start really high up, um, like so companies that we work with that are later stage serve so many different customer segments and they have the go-to-market engines to back it up. That's what
Yeah.
we often find happens in the early stage that they get wrong. It's like, we want to go after these 10 segments. And I'm like, how big is your go-to-market team? They're like, well, we got an AE and we have a marketing intern. And we're like, okay, well, do you think you're going to penetrate even one of those segments with that group? Probably not. So, but if you're a big company and you have dedicated go-to-market teams and even dedicated product management teams for each of those segments, right? Because when those segments come into the product, you want to tailor the onboarding flow to get them to their specific aha moment, which might be a different part of the product than someone else.
Absolutely.
QuickBooks actually is a very mature product, obviously, but they do a really good job of this. Their onboarding flow, you basically say, what am I trying to do with the product? You choose, and then they actively hide the sections of the product that don't matter to you. So you're effectively like creating sub products within the broader product to make everyone's onboarding experience make sense. But so when you're broadening the positioning, what ends up happening is you might, like, let's say at the homepage level, you might have to cut an anchor because maybe the anchor was too specific to segments. So like, for example, Calendly, right? Or let's take Canva. Canva is a design tool. Originally, they might have said we were a design tool. I think like they targeted people making yearbooks. So at the beginning, they might have said we're the yearbook design tool, right, for teachers or something. So it got bigger and then layered on more use cases. They might just say we're a really easy to use design tool. So they lop off the who and they just anchor on the product category. And then what they have to do as quickly as possible is create doorways on the website to point to these more specific pages. So, for example, if you have a page for here's how teachers would do it, or here's how, um, product managers would use it, or here's how design teams would use it, whatever. You basically create these sub pages, and ideally, when people come to the homepage, they would filter down, find the page for them, and actually get, introduced to the product in the right context. But what really is actually the most powerful is helping proactively go out to these people and bring those sub pages to them in your go to market. So you would say, okay, well, we're going to go reach teachers. You would run a marketing plan or whatever it's going to be that actually targets the teachers, and it might be ads or whatever it is. And rather than pointing people to this big broad homepage, you would point them to the sub landing page around the teachers. And so you're creating all these mini positionings for each of these different groups that are much more specific, have way more anchors, and are ideally going to be a lot more helpful and interesting to the people who see the message. So we basically see it, tackling two ways. It's like you might have to just remove some anchors, keep an anchor at the top, and then eventually, if a company gets big enough and they have so many different products and different customers that by that point they might remove all the anchors, and the only thing left is really the brand. They just on the strength of the brand. So eventually, everyone, if you get big enough, you don't really differentiate on product anymore. You differentiate on brand. And so you would say, well, do I like Apple or do I like Microsoft better? Or do I like Apple or do I like Samsung better if we're talking phones? And obviously, features will make a difference, but likely by that point, the camps have solidified and there's going to be very little crossing back and forth. And it's more just like, I follow Apple because I believe in them as a company. And it's less about like, what problem does Apple solve for me, right? Because it's a multitude of problems across multiple products.
Sure. I just have a remark to make on the Airtable value prop that you talked about, right? Stay connected and achieve anything can be a tagline for Zapier or even Facebook, right?
Yeah,
Like stay
exactly.
connected and
It worked for
achieve
anyone.
anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love how Notion made it like pretty clear, because while you were mentioning Airtable, I just figured that because I always knew ClickUp went very like tactical and use case level, so I've loved them for that. Obviously, however buggy that product might be, their marketing team kicks ass.
Yeah.
Uh, but I love how clearly Notion puts it: your wiki, docs, and projects together. Notion
Yep.
is the connected workspace where better and faster work happens. Like very
And they
clear,
did. They
like, what to
strung
expect, right?
together. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
They strung together those 3 product categories that are very easy to understand. So you're like, oh,
Ideally,
that
if
sounds
they
great.
wanted to have that 30,000 view that as Airtable had, I think equally they could have like claimed that same value prop and
Hmm.
mean nothing. But they went very tactical, or maybe it was after the recession and like CFOs came biting in the posterior about it. I because I don't remember what was the earlier positioning, but this I like. This is like this is something that gives me something to latch on to from the very first word.
Yeah,
So
and it helps you because when you would go to, and now Airtable, to their credit, they've changed it. Now their new headline is, oh, I'm logged in. I got to look at incognito. The fastest way to build apps.
Yeah, the
So
Hmm.
they now anchor on that use case, right? They're anchoring on like, what are people trying to do? Yeah, exactly.
It's
Transform your
no
business
code
with
thing, right?
Airtables. Yeah, next gen app platform. So
Yeah.
yeah, so really they're anchoring more on like this capability, right? Like or actually probably would technically be a benefit, right? Like build apps faster than any other way. That's like a promise, like we would call a benefit statement. But then they have this right next gen app platform. That's like the product category. Maybe they're trying to create that category. I don't think app platform is a thing. Maybe it is, but like I think they used to say even no code app builder at one point, which at least is a well known category.
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
these fad come and go, and people like latch on to that forever. I see a lot of PLG getting kicked off home pages recently.
Yep.
So let's see what's next
Yeah.
in this
Yeah,
Pandora's box of positioning.
I think the last
Yeah.
2 years have been the time of product led anything. So it was product
Yeah.
led growth, it is product led sales,
Marketing.
product led marketing. Now, product led customer success is something also I heard on LinkedIn, which I don't know, only a
Don't believe everything that you hear on LinkedIn, Chappy.
yeah, somebody on the chat says profit-led SEO. Funny things. Uh, just quickly, I think this is a good point to segue into early stage product marketing. Essentially, there are times wherein the product is not really ready. You don't know who the ICP is. The buyer persona is also not really very clear to you, right? In so many moving pieces, what are the kinds of challenges do you see when it comes to product marketing at early stage startups?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of challenges, right? Most of them rely on the like are because of the fact that you don't have data. So if you're a big company and you're a product manager of a company like Google, everything is data driven, right? So you say, well, we just look at the data, we slice it up, and we figure out what we need to do, and then we make our decisions based on data. In the early stage, you don't have data. You don't have enough users for data. You
Sure.
don't have enough visitors to your website to really accurately run A/B tests. Everything is much more gut and intuition, and like taking signals more from qualitative feedback than quantitative. So product marketers face an interesting challenge where um, everything is shifting. So the lack of data is one. Another piece as a challenge is how much uncertainty you're dealing with. For example, if you go out and you pitch your MVP to someone on a sales call and they're not interested, it's not super clear why they weren't interested necessarily. It
Mm-hmm.
might be because your product sucks. It might be because the problem that you think you're solving is not really a real problem. It could be that your product is amazing. The problem is 100% real and painful, and that person has the problem, but your messaging was so bad that they didn't connect all those dots, and they're like, "Oh, I don't need this," because they think you're one thing rather than another. So tons and tons of uncertainty in startup world, especially for product marketers. It's very, very difficult. So
Sure.
we see those two time and time again, and founders and marketing teams at early stage startups struggle a lot if they come from bigger companies. So like we actually say like don't hire from Google or Facebook or whatever if you're a startup, because they're going to come in and their whole frame of reference of how they do things is going to be completely different than what you need them to do. You need
Mm-hmm.
scrappy people who are jumping in and trying to solve problems in different ways and love the uncertainty, thrive in the uncertainty, and are able to make decisions from the hip. They don't need to run a 3-month, 6-month study because really you don't have time for that. So like even when we work with people, founders, to help them with positioning and messaging, we say a couple of things. We say we move very fast. These are going to be 2-week sprints. And they're like, well, don't you have to go out and collect all the data and synthesize and we're like, yes, but you don't
Mm-hmm.
have time for that. your runway is going to run out. And if you hire, especially if you're hiring external people for 2 to 3 month projects, that's going to be super expensive, and you're going to burn all this runway, and it might be wrong at the end, because by the time you've run all the analysis and you turn out it's wrong, that's not going to help you at all. So what we try to do is like get them a really, really quick win early on. And we even say, you're probably going to still have to adjust this as you learn. So it's a super difficult environment for early stage teams, which is why you kind of really need people who like that and thrive in that.
Got it. I think a follow-up question on this is like in a typically in an early stage setup, since there are a lot of moving parts to it, and you don't really know moving which part or which lever will essentially impact the outcome that you are trying to achieve. So there could be like you could have a hypothesis around metric not moving because there is a positioning problem, or because there is a PMF problem, or because there is a targeting problem. How do you even ascertain in a typically, as you said, right, there is not enough data. Uh, when you pitch in your services to, let's say, startups, early stage startups, how do you even convince them this is a positioning problem? And typically from a particularly coming from a outside in perspective, right, you acting as consultants and telling them, boss, this is a positioning problem, and you should rather position yourself for this particular target audience in such and such manner.
Yeah, the convincing happens ideally months and months and months before they ever reach out to us. So like that's why me and my partner Robert, we invest really heavily in like thought leadership as a growth strategy on LinkedIn specifically, because we basically every day we post things like, here's how you know you have a positioning problem, here's how you know when you have a messaging problem, things like that. Because what we're trying to do is convince people to take a look and say, it's probably not, might not be the product's problem, it might not even be the market problem, it might just be the relation between the two, how we actually explain this product to this specific group. And so that's what we post about all the time. And what we're trying to do is get people to take a hard look at their messaging. Even we were working with a company a couple weeks ago, and the founder got on, and we were like, we think you should maybe, based on everything you're telling us, you should position yourself this one way. And they said, well, we already tried that and it didn't work. And we actually looked at when they said we tried that, we looked at it, and the page was awful. It was extremely hard to understand, and like it was like poorly written, and there was all these benefit language that like hid what the product did. And I'm like, you didn't actually try that though, because no one even knew that that's what you were trying to do. So a lot of what we're trying to do is to get them to realize that it is not, product marketing is not easy to get right on accident, right? It's not like I don't really think about it and it just works. That's rarely the case. It is very much discipline, just like engineering is not something you kind of get good at on accident. Like, I accidentally built this product really well. That's not really going to happen. You kind of have to engineer it in a specific way so that it will scale and all that stuff. It's very the same when you're talking about positioning and messaging and value propositions and all that stuff. If you're not actively thinking about it from that lens, you will likely not be doing it very well, which will cause all sorts of issues in your sales, your marketing, your customer success, your product management. All those things kind of go out the window if you don't have these very basic product marketing fundamentals down.
Got it. And just an extension to what I just asked, right? There is a question from Chintan in the chat here. How do you decide if it is a positioning problem or a GTM problem? And the Chintan has also given an example, like if the messaging is spot on, but there is a issue around outreach, or how the sales team is doing the outreaches and doing the demonstrations and stuff. How do you essentially draw that line and ascertain whether it is like a positioning messaging problem, or the problem lies with somewhere in the sales side of things?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very complicated question, right? There's a lot of different factors that go into. It's not like an easy answer of like, it's always this or that. Some early indications that we like to point out. If different segments call your product different things, it's not necessarily a big deal, right? Prosumers calling Airtable, it's like a more advanced spreadsheet, versus database engineers saying it's a simplified database. That's fine. If the same group of people call your product vastly different things, you probably have a positioning problem, because that means that the group you're trying to reach can't really figure out where to put you, and they're pulling from different ideas, and likely a lot of those ideas they might be pulling from and comparing you to are not the best things you want to be compared to. So like we worked with a company that was trying to frame themselves as like a business intelligence market research tool, but they kept getting pulled into, oh, you're just an SEO keyword tool. That's what the customers were calling them. And so they were fighting this tension because they were like, if we get compared to an SEO keyword tool, we're actually not very good. Like if in that category, we're actually not very good at it. So positioning problem. What we would say if it's a go-to-market problem is if you pitch it on a decent amount of one-to-one sales calls and the people get it, their eyes light up, they understand it, they can say it back to you, and they're interested, right? Maybe they're not interested, but they get it. That's usually an indication that your positioning and messaging is right. Or look at if it's maybe like a more product-led company, if there's a segment of users who really, really, really like your product and they understand it and they get it, but a lot of other people who you think should be getting it are not, that's likely a go-to-market problem. That you would say that, like, okay, for whatever reason, the channels we're using, it's not actually translating. Maybe it's the way it's being executed, the ads we're running, what they're saying on the sales calls. So it's like if you can confirm early signs of product market fit, where a group of people all think about you and talk about you the same way, love you, and you're not able to get more of those people who should love you for the same reasons because they're in the same context, it's likely a problem with your go-to-marketing and not necessarily a positioning messaging problem.
That's a really good answer, and sort of sheds light on a lot of things that I'm going through. Maybe. Sorry for too much. Sorry for sharing too much.
No, that's fine.
I just wanted to ask one of my like pet peeves regarding product marketing, because I truly believe, because at heart I am also sort of a product marketer at early stages, but I also wanted to understand, and I have fought this forever, is how do you put metrics to this role? Like how do you show to non-product marketers that product marketing is valuable? Like what are those metrics that we can actually put in and make the leadership believe that product marketing is working or not working for that matter?
I kind of have I have two answers. The first answer is tools like you guys probably have heard of Winter, WYNTER.
Yeah.
Tools like Winter are very helpful in quantifying some of these things because you can run these surveys and you can run these qualitative pieces, and essentially it boils it down to scores. So you could say, here was it. We ran our first iteration of the homepage through Winter. People didn't get it. They gave us a score of 2 out of 5. After we invested in product marketing, now they gave us a 5 out of 5. So that's one quantitative way. Tools like Winter, user testing has some interesting things as well. You can like show a value proposition for a couple seconds, then take it away, and then ask the people like, "What did you just see?" And if they're able to say it back, it's usually a sign that you're like doing it decently well. So you have tools like that, but the bad news is that, especially in startup land, good product marketing may actually drive metrics in the wrong way. Still for a good reason, but in the wrong way. So let's say you're like, all right, we want to increase conversion rates on our homepage. So you invest in product marketing. You do the whole thing, and then guess what happens? Conversion rates go down. And everyone's like, it failed. But in reality, what might be happening is that your very wishy-washy, broad messaging in your first iteration was bringing in all sorts of bad fit customers who were going to churn out of your product anyways. So after they used it for a day, they're like, oh, I thought this was something else. And then they leave. So even conversions being high, but then a high churn rate once they get in, is a sign that these things could be wrong. So it's a complex problem to solve, because good product marketing then might say, all right, well, now when those bad fit customers come to the website and they actually understand what it is you're selling, they go, oh, this is not for me. And they bounce. So the bounce rate goes up. The conversion rate goes down. And you're like, the whole thing failed. When actually you might have solved the exact problem that you were trying to solve, which is filtering for the best fit customers and getting more of them. So that's just like one instance where it's not quite cut and dry. So we treat it more like there's a whole movement now in marketing, like Chris Walker, if you guys follow him, big influencer, his whole like, if you only invest in the things that are easily measured, you're going to screw yourself, because a lot of these bigger ticket items, like these big, bold marketing moves that are not super attributable to like, we can track exactly where they came in, actually the things that move the needle. So this comes, from my opinion, this comes from the big company mentality of everything needs to have data backing it. Where in startup land, and especially even bigger company land, that's just not how it always works. Maybe one day we'll get better attribution, and there's tools that are trying to do this. Like I think of one called Hockey Stack. They're really trying to tie it through with all these conventional ways. But a lot of stuff you just can't track. Word of mouth, you can't really track. Chris Walker talks about dark social, like big Slack groups. You can't really track what's going on in there. But sometimes those things move the needle more than anything. So I see product marketing and stuff like that kind of falling in the same bucket, for better or for worse, almost like how brand marketing, you can't really perfectly track. Well, when we ran these ads, especially like, so it's funny because B2B is obsessed with this type of stuff, and B2C is like, we've never been able to track that. What are you talking about? We run Super Bowl ads, and then the numbers either go up or they go down. We can't trace back to it was that Super Bowl ad. They can't see who's watching it in the houses. So B2B, I think they've been maybe a little bit overcompensating on the data side, when in reality, a lot of this stuff is more like B2C, where it's like, yeah, but still most of the stuff is untrackable, and maybe that's fine.
The advantage that B2C firms have over SaaS is their founders are not engineers.
That's very true. They're probably more. I would love to see a breakdown of founders in B2C companies versus B2B, and how many more B2C ones are more marketing minded, and how many more B2B ones are more engineering minded. I bet you're right.
There's a reason why B2C founders at one point of time were called promoters, right?
I love it. That's amazing.
I think that tells me that gives me a good insight. Also, sort of banks upon the entire lead velocity metric, but that is still a lagging metric. So, like, and still a lot of gray area there. But yeah, that sort of answers my question that there is no answer to this, apart from that, apart from that winter perspective.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
but I have a defense now. So if the conversion rate goes down, I have a defense.
Yeah.
Here's what
For
happened.
sure. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Great. When it comes to hiring for a early stage role, like a founding marketer role, often at times the founders themselves are not really clear between whether to hire somebody with a demand generation background or somebody who has had content slash product marketing background. Um, and essentially, at an early stage startup, the need of the hour is to get more leads, more and more sign-ups, so that you can get more feedback on the product sooner than later, right? And hence, a lot of founders tend to hire for demand generation folks early on. But then there is an increasing trend that I am also seeing in my conversations with founders, that they are more open to hire product marketers as their first marketer, and probably get a agency on board to help on the demand generation side of things. How have you seen this play out in your experience? Do you see early stage marketing teams have of one or two people have product marketers?
Yeah, it varies a lot depending on the company. And the tricky thing is, we've pointed this out before, the founding team of most startups, like the archetypal founding team, is a builder and a seller. The builder is the engineering minded person. The seller is going out there trying to get people to buy and trying to get investors to invest. What's missing is the marketer, because the seller is not usually a marketer. It's someone who's, like visionary and it's like, we're trying to build this, blah, blah, blah. But the person who's going to be able to actually get from segment to segment to segment, start dominating, is a marketer, and that person's missing. And then even on the venture capital side, Emily Kramer, she's a pretty big name. She talks about how in VC, less than 1% of venture capitalists come from a marketing background. So you've got duos with no marketers being funded by firms with no marketers. And so, which is why you get all these hilarious, spectacular failures of companies. So what we always say is, you need to someone as your first marketing hire who understands, and this is going to sound really silly, marketing. Not tactics, but understands like basics about market segmentation and about how would we actually reach people and distribution. Like me and my partner Rob, we always joke around. Everything we share on LinkedIn is literally just marketing fundamentals, like 101 level fundamentals. But so many people who get into marketing come in through the tactic side. Like even me, I didn't grow up a marketer, and I used to think marketing was so boring because I was like this. Well, marketing, that's like I got to run a Facebook ad. I got to memorize what day do I run Facebook ads? What time's better than other? Don't post at 2, post at 5. Here's how you pick the. So like in my mind, marketing was just a collection of tactics, and I was like, they usually don't work very well. They're gonna be really expensive. We're not gonna have money. When in reality, marketing fundamentals is like, how do you grow a profitable business, right? Like, how are you actually gonna make this business have people want to buy your product? And it's much more base level. So whoever you hire in an early stage company needs to be thinking like that. Like, okay, we want to dominate this giant total addressable market. Well, we're probably going to need to start with some segments. What group of people we're going to go after and be able to actually identify what is a segment. Are we going to segment around a use case? Are we going to segment around a role? And founders, especially like visionary built like seller type founders, never think those questions. It's all baffling to them to be like, what? I can't just go out and get the whole market at once. So whether you bring in a demand gen, product marketer, whoever it is, the person has to be thinking like that. And we would also say this person should be more of a generalist. They should know a decent amount kind of across the whole spectrum. You know, there's like the T-shaped marketer. They know something really well. There's the pie-shaped marketer. They know 2 things really well. That's kind of less important because
I'm a donut marketer.
That's next, right? Because what's going to happen is that as the product pivots, you may realize we need to be a sales-led company. We need to invest in AEs and SDRs, or we might realize this is really going to be an SEO-driven play as we are pivoting, right? We're really around a specific use case. I think of a company, Small PDF. Their product was take a big PDF, shrink it down. That's a use case. That's SEO land all day, right? Yeah. How do I target people shrinking PDFs? There's no list I can buy. There's no people outbound sales of, well, here's my list of 100 people shrinking PDFs. Nobody knows who that is. It's probably going to be an SEO play or a content play where you're blasting out viral things about, shrinking a PDF. So the type of marketer who you hire or like the next role is almost more important based on what the first role figures out from a more strategic level. That first role needs to actually help you figure out like what is the right segment, leading you through the pivots, and then figuring out, okay, this segment loves us. Let's go after them and let's hire a demand gen person. Or this segment loves us, but our product's really complicated, so we need to hire a product marketer to actually explain it well. Or this segment, is harder to reach, and we can really only do it through SEO, so let's bring in an SEO person. You're not going to know that until you go through that initial pivoting through the different segments to actually make the decision.
Oh, you mean to say you need to have multiple marketing people in a team?
It's almost like you need multiple marketers. And the funny thing is, like me and my partner Robert, we're like, if we ever do a SaaS company, we feel like we already are better positioned because it's not only one product marketer, but we have 2 product marketers. Every time one of us, even when we're talking about our own consultancy, one of us will be like, well, what if we added on this service and this service? And then the other one will say, we don't have the bandwidth to do that. We got to focus, pick a sec. And then we're like, yeah, you're right. So even with one, like we've seen founder, we've worked with companies where the founder is a product marketer background, but when they put on the founder hat, they become the builder and the visionary, and they throw all their product marketing advice out the window. And they're like, I'm going to tackle every market at the same time. And then they make all the mistakes. So it's like, one is usually not even enough. You might actually need 2 to help you stay grounded in reality.
Got it. We have a question in chat by Jayati, and the question is around how do you define your ICP with limited data and resources? I don't have more context on it, but if you could just give overview about the process of defining ICP by persona.
Yeah, so we actually see like true defining of ICP, like data-driven, happens probably around Series B most of the time if we're talking venture-backed. Usually if you're a Series B company, you have validated that a market segment or many segments have a lot of confidence in you and like your product and want to use it. And then usually the jump from Series A to Series B is like, you're actually going to say, okay, let's actually look across all of our data and segment for our specific ICP. So like the best founders and marketing teams that we've talked to in this stage are basically like, all right, we used our Series A fundraising to collect these different users and all these different user types. Now let's interview them. And they usually run like a bunch of like qualitative, sometimes jobs to be done interviews and things like that. They size the data and they realize, okay, this segment loves us 10 times more than any of the other ones. They pay us 10 times more. They upsell 10 times more often. All the metrics, right? They have fastest sales cycles. And they're basically ranking these segments against each other. And then they say, this one gives us 80% of our revenue. Let's double down. And then like Series B is, Series C, sometimes they'll be adding on multiple more products to like go after multiple segments and you have multiple ICPs. So in the early stage, like I said, you don't have the data. So the ICP is a little bit looser, kind of like a continuing process of narrowing. So me with my partner, Rob, when we started doing this type of work, we had a loose idea of what work we want to do and a loose idea of the segment. We said we want to help with positioning and we want to help with startups. Over time, as we met with startup founders and who responded to our content, we kept narrowing. And so we said, okay, well, it's probably not all startups, right? A Series D startup that's raised $600 million has very different problems than a bootstrapped founder who's one or two people with no money and is trying to figure this out. So we started narrowing in, and then we were like, okay, maybe it's actually probably early stage founders. And then we're like, well, how early stage? Is it like right at the beginning? Is it pre-seed? And then we're like, actually, it makes more sense seed to like Series A. That kind of is a good spot. And then we're like, okay, well, is it all like B2C? Is it? And then we're like, actually, it probably makes more sense to do B2B. That's kind of, they're facing these types of problems more often. And then we're like, okay, is it all B2B? Is it marketplaces? Is it, hardware? Well, no, it's probably SaaS. It's mostly SaaS companies. So then we narrowed it down a little bit more. And then we were like, all right, well, is it all SaaS companies? Because there's vertical SaaS companies that are going after a specific industry. They don't really have the same product marketing problem because they're already speaking the language of their customers. Well, we make software for miners. You know what I mean? Like mining companies. It's like, all right, well, if you're a founder and you're a miner background, like mining background, you're going to understand and speak the language of the people. So it's not really vertical SaaS. It's probably more horizontal SaaS. So over time, you're gradually taking this big wide funnel and getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, honing in on the people who like you the most. And the funny thing is that the more that we do that, the more clients we land, the more our posts go viral, the more that people are interested. They share word of mouth with each other. So it's like we like to joke around. There really are riches and niches, because total domination of a decent sized market is so much more powerful than partial versus non-existent domination of a giant market. So like that's where we would say like that initial ICP is like, if you could find a group and get like become like we talked to a guy. He was a LinkedIn influencer guy, and he's like, all I do is I help companies that are making event planning software. So he's like, that's my niche. I'm the event planning software like advising guy. And he had like 30 or 40,000 LinkedIn followers. And he was like, I'm killing it. Like, I am absolutely dominating. And I was like, who's your competitors? He's like, no one. He's like, I am the undisputed leader of this entire sub niche. And so like, when you find the group small enough, you like big fish in a small pond is way better than being a small fish in a big pond. And then like, if you're a startup, right, and you're trying to reach $1 billion valuations and stuff, it's like, you start with that strategy, dominate it, and then use your success in the small pond to get adjacent ponds. Like goes back to that book, Crossing the Chasm, right? So Jeffrey Moore, I think he writes this book maybe like 40 years ago, maybe not that long. Let's see. It came out originally in 1991. So not 40 years, maybe closer to 30 years. He's been saying this since the 90s, the idea that you take a beachhead market, like and it goes back to World War II metaphor. America basically helped.
You have your own wedge.
Yes, they came in the wedge of D-Day, which came in through Normandy, and they had to take that first before they could expand out to the other ones. So get the wedge, nail it, and then you can broaden out, rather than having no wedge, trying to attack all the different things at once, which is not going to work, and you won't have penetration in any of them.
Got it. No, it does make a lot of sense, Anthony. Just we are towards the end of this session. Wanted to know from you your story of starting Fletch PMM and how did you come about? Because you were before this, I see from your LinkedIn, you were director product marketing at Headway. So, what's your story like? How did you even decide to quit your job and get into this full time?
Yeah. So we actually started as a offshoot of Headway. So we were working at this agency called Headway. They do product design, product development, and product strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing company. Anyone who needs help with any of those things should absolutely work with them. They're incredible. So there's no bad blood or anything. We love them. We're still partnering on stuff with them today. So Headway, we were actually trying to figure out like, is there a part of the business that could be more repeatable, that we could create like a ongoing a new generation of clients. And so me and my partner Rob and a couple other people, we tried a bunch of different things, and we were in the product strategy arm of the company. So we were trying to sell product strategy, and unless you have extreme trust in the
Mm-hmm.
agency, people don't want to outsource strategy. It's just something that's not in their mind. They're like, I'm the founder. I want to do the product
I,
strategy, right?
you
That's
do
my
the
job.
execution. Yeah.
Exactly. So what ended up happening is we said, okay, as we kept going, we realized that product strategy is very adjacent to product marketing, because product marketing is things like, who are we going to go after? How are we going to reach them? And that, like, all those questions influence what you build. Like we say product
Mm-hmm.
strategy and product marketing are like two sides of the same coin. And so um, as we kept going, we realized that we were like, okay, let's lean into this product marketing thing, because once we started calling it product marketing, all these founders were super interested. And so we kept leaning down that path. We were posting about it, and we kind of created a new department in the agency that really just was, at first, it was just me, and I was posting about it all the time, and our account was on an island. And then eventually Robert joined with me, and the two of us were doing it. And then what would happen though is the problem is people would come to the Headway website and they'd be like, "This is kind of confusing. I don't see product marketing anywhere. You guys look more like a design shop. How does this make sense?" And then we would all kind of be like, "Well, no, it's different." And then and also Headway would work with a lot of types of clients. They'd work with
Hmm.
enterprise clients, giant companies, right, like Fortune 500. And we were really only working with early stage startups. So even things like pricing, when they saw Headway's prices, they were a lot higher than what we were charging, because we were going after a different segment that couldn't afford enterprise prices for like a boutique design agency. So eventually, like, it was a lot of confusion and stuff like that. We were trying to figure out where we fit, and then eventually we
Got it.
realized it would probably make sense for us to just spin off, become our own entity, and then still partner with Headway on like bigger projects when we needed to. And so we actually, it was like probably a 2-month process of like slowly winding down what we were doing with Headway and then starting on Fletch. And so that actually only officially split like a couple weeks ago, or even maybe it was even last week, like the actual formal splitting. So now me and Robert are on our own. We're out in there, the two of us, very like pull yourself up by your bootstraps, trying to get things off the ground. But we've basically been able to get a good amount of traction on LinkedIn, which has allowed us to get a continuous stream of clients. And really, for us, one of the reasons we went more the shorter package service route rather than ongoing long-term consulting was because we really are trying to take this product marketing thing that's kind of a black box, hard to explain, hard to execute, and actually make like a framework around it that makes sense and is very robust and accounts for all the edge cases. And so when we work with lots of different startups all the time, it's basically every startup we work with is a new chance to improve the framework. We treat the framework like it's a product. We're constantly iterating on it. It changes by the week how we're actually doing this. I do think it's getting better and better and better every time how we think about these things, because we're really just taking what's in our brains and trying to externalize them
Hmm.
in ways that can help these startups. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, no, interesting to know this from an outsider's perspective. I always thought like you started this agency and did not know actually that you were part of the Headway, and actually did not look at Headway and the offerings they had. I thought of them as like a product company.
Yeah.
Uh, Anyway, I think I have one or two questions coming from just out of curiosity. Why the name Fletch?
Yeah. So a friend of mine actually came up with it. I didn't even know this, but when you have a bow and arrow, the
Hmm.
arrow, when you put the feathers on the bow, on
Hmm.
the actual shaft, it's
Yeah.
called fletching the arrow. So you say, I
Hmm.
fletch an arrow, And so the process of adding these arrows makes it so that the arrow flies straight and hits the target. So we're like, it's kind of like what we're helping them do: refine the messaging, point it in one direction, make it fly straight, hit the target, all that kind of stuff. So maybe kind of cheesy, but we were like, maybe it's memorable, easy to pronounce. So that's kind of how we landed.
Interesting. And with respect to the offering that you have, I see on the website at least there are two things that a user can come onto your landing page and uh, get your services for, which is one is website messaging development, and the other one is messaging audit. Any reasons, like how did you even come about offering these two packages to your users, your
Yeah, it
customers?
was a long iterative process. They've
Mhm.
changed multiple times, right? We've tried different, and like we only are publicly listing those two, but we're constantly testing all sorts of other variations of
Sure.
ways to do this, and always changing and tweaking to see what makes most sense and what's the best for the user. So the two relative products we offer in audit is we actually go through your website today.
Mhm.
We break it down line by line, and we basically give you our opinions on what could make it better. We say, here's where the issues are. Like for example, you have all these benefits. You never talk about what the features and capabilities are. So no one knows what you're actually selling. That would be something we would point out, and then we would give them recommendations. So that's much more like the do-it-yourself model of like, we'll audit it, give you the things to fix it, and then we actually have a giant Notion database of all of our product marketing frameworks and advice and stuff like that we give as part of that audit. So like we basically say, here's our recommendations and here's all the tools, go and fix it yourself. The messaging development piece is we actually do it in the trenches with you. We basically say, we don't really care what's on your homepage right now. We're kind of going to
Mhm.
scrap it, at least mentally, for this exercise. We're going to come at this from first principles and say, how would we build your messaging from the ground up? So it's
Ground
not like
up.
most of the time, we don't even look at what they have today because we don't
Mhm.
want to actually pigeonhole us in one direction. We kind of lay it out from first principles and we say, what is the product? We have them do a demo. We start asking about who's using it, use cases, things like that. And then we basically use our framework to help them rebuild the messaging from the ground up. And then the deliverable of that is we actually give them, here's a new web page wireframe for your homepage. That's all the words that we would suggest that you use, the order that you should put them in, the sections you should include. So they can actually just take that wireframe, it's in Figma, give it to their Webflow developer, whoever's doing the website, and then very easily make the changes. So those are kind of the two ways that we do it. And even in that one, the second one, depending on where the company is in their stage, if they're very early stage, a lot of times we help them do the homepage. But if they're later stage, a lot of times we'll help them remake landing pages for
Landing
specific
pages.
segments. At that point, sometimes it's like the homepage is less important. It's not as important maybe as like, well, we've got these dedicated go-to-market teams going after this segment, and we really want to get them right for them. So, but the underlying process is the same, whether we're doing it
Yeah.
for the homepage or the landing page.
Yeah. Interesting. And with this, I see there are no more questions that are to be answered in the chat at least. Rohit, anything from your side before I we close?
I think I'm good. Thanks so much for adding so much value, Anthony, and giving us
Definitely.
a
Thanks so much for having me. For sure.
So yeah, I think it was great to have you here, and thank you for sparing the time to talk to our audience. We will upload the recording for this session on YouTube, on the S11s channel, and I particularly learned a few new things about product marketing, and glad that you mentioned a lot of these examples from Airtable, from Canva, and the likes, which essentially expands the horizon of our understanding as well around positioning and messaging. Um, and as I said, thank you for giving us your time, and we'll see you around.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks, everyone. See you in S11s. Bye.
Bye.